A very warm welcome to all of our attendees today. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tanu Banerjee. I am a partner at Indus Law, where I'm part of the TMT practice group, and I head the media and entertainment practice. I will be the moderator for today's session. Our agenda today is to get some insights on how the media industry is coping with these strange times, which now look like the new normal. I'm sure we would all agree that across the world, all business sectors are trying to recover from the sudden impact of the COVID 19. And it may be a fair assumption to make that after the last 4 to 5 months, where we are today is possibly and hopefully the early beginning of the post COVID 19 era. With that in mind, in the next hour or so, we hope to touch upon various aspects, such as the initial impact of the pandemic in the media sector, some recent developments and new opportunities that evolved during this time, and some key strategies and things to consider in the future landscape. I must add here that we have a stellar set of panelists with us today, all of who have many years of experience in the media industry and who have truly run the show from behind the scenes in different ways. So do stay tuned with us till the end of the session. I'm sure there will be great takeaways for all of us. Uh, During the discussion, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. Towards the end of the session, we will try to address as many questions as possible. But if for some reason we are unable to do so, we will reach out to you offline. Um, Let me start now with introducing our panelists for the day. First off, we have Mr. Zamir Nathani. Zamir is a Senior Vice President and General Counsel of UFO Movies, which is India's leading technology developer for digital format of content for movie theaters. Prior to UFO, he was with Reliance Entertainment, where he looked after various digital businesses. He has also been the head of legal at Balaji Telefilms and at Raymond Limited. Zamir has many academic degrees to his credit from prestigious institutions internationally, including from the Harvard Business School. He recently also received the General Counsel of the Year award from Indian National Bar Association. Welcome, Zamir. We next have Ms. Parul Sabharwal. Parul is the head of legal at Times Internet Limited. Times Internet, as we all know, is one of the largest internet companies in India and is home to multiple digital businesses within the Times Group. Parul has over 15 years of experience, and prior to Times Internet, she was the director legal at Snapdeal. Welcome, Parul. Uh, we then have Ms. Persis Odiwala. Persis has more than a decade of experience in the media industry as an in-house counsel. She is currently the chief legal manager at Reliance Big Entertainment, prior to which she was also part of Foxstar Studios and Phantom Films. Welcome, Persis. And last but definitely not the least, our special guest today, Mr. Karan Bedi. Karan is the CEO of MX Player. Under his leadership, MX has become the largest premium entertainment platform in India in a very, very short span. Karan is a Stanford alumni and brings with him over a decade of experience across media and tech industries. Prior to MX, he was also the chief operating officer of Eros Now, before which he was an entrepreneur in the EdTech space. Uh, Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for taking the time today to be with us. Um, I will now start off with our discussion today. Let me start with Zamir. Uh, Zamir, when in around mid of March and early April, when COVID really hit India and the lockdowns were announced, there were various immediate and apparent impacts which could be seen in the media sector. Some of the most obvious ones were, of course, that the theaters were shut, and films that were playing at the time suddenly overnight started losing box office revenues. Films that were set to release could not get released. Productions were stalled, ad spends were pulled out by advertisers. And I think lawyers across the industry started looking at and revisiting their distribution deals, revisiting their contracts, and force majeure clauses and exit clauses, etc. I'd love to know from you, as part of the management at UFO and also as a legal counsel, what was happening behind the scene in terms of mitigating the impact, and what were the first reactions?
Uh, good afternoon, everyone. The first thing what we saw as the world saw it in terms of execution, increasing lawyers' job as well as the webinars were the force major events. So, force major notices were the first thing which came for everyone. Everyone got into the standard force major clause, which had no mention of pandemic because pandemic was not mentioned under the law. We had a law which mentions epidemic,
Right.
and consequently we started writing on the same to all the relevant companies. Companies started exchanging those letters. End of the day, everybody knew that it's completely, the whole industry has been hit. It's not a single person. And I saw a very good thing which happened in the film industry, which I can tell you, is that there were people, uh, 95%, 97%. I saw that there was a good response in terms of both sides, because this was a time when both sides had to sit down and think about it, that, whether this is a purpose for which the contracts have been suspended, is really everybody has been genuinely hit. It's not a court litigation which should venture in. Uh, Initial days for the film industry were a little rough, where people said, yeah, this is a force major, but like the Supreme Court said when the lawyers association went, that there can be a poor tenant, there can be a poor landlord. uh, but what we saw overall is that force major issues were gradually resolved and resolving in the 3 months period. That is what we saw. Another dynamic thing which I saw in the industry is that, see, there were 4,000 plus cinemas. There are 4,000 plus cinemas in India. All right. Now, these cinemas being shut down, we had various discussions,
Right.
calls with the CEOs of those companies like PVR, Kamal. I had the fortune to work with him in Reliance. Uh, Inox was there. Other big chains were there. Uh, Everybody was considerably hit, more than any other persons. The cinema industry was hit because their rentals were on, the premises were big, there were a lot of employees in the system, etc. But gradually, slowly, people started accepting the fact that it's the reality of life. On the production side, shootings and all were stopped. Reruns were the order of the day. New content has started being produced. uh, in those arenas also, we saw that there are all actors who have come together and accommodated this situation. We have seen very less people approaching the court in a litigation way, which we actually thought that it would be a plethora of litigation. But I think people accepted that truth on that side. So that's about UFO film industry and the production houses also. That's from my side. Thank you.
Good to hear that they were positive in the apparent adversities that were seeming like at the time. Persis, I'll bring you in here. Zamir mentioned about productions being called and the talents being cooperative actually. But in terms of, since you deal with a lot of productions and movies at Reliance, what are the things that, sort of challenges that you faced in terms of talent engagements, or in terms of, let's say, schedules that were already blocked, uh, things that may have be planned altogether. Um, what was your experience in the whole thing, and how was it managed internally?
So, am I audible? You
Yes,
can
you're
hear
audible,
me?
Persis.
Yeah. So when the lockdown happened in March, luckily we were not on floor with too many projects. But I'm sure, as everybody knows, Suryavanshi was about to release in the theaters on 24th of March, and the lockdown was announced on 21st of March. So we had to pull out all the publicity material and everything. And thankfully, we didn't go ahead with the theatrical release of the film. Otherwise, such a big budget, heavy star cast movie would have got stuck in the theaters. So that was the first thing which happened. In terms of contract and handling actors, as Zamir rightly said, every talent came forward and respected the fact that and supported that yes, this is the right decision taken by the management of not theatrically releasing it. And when it came to on-floor projects, so during this lockdown, I've seen, when I deal with a lot of actors, directors, there is a lot of development which is happening. It turned out to be a blessing for some of the directors and writers, since they have a lot of time at home, writing the new material, new content, come up with fresh ideas. So we entered into talent-based contracts in terms of the writers and directors. But again, coming to the talent, for some of the projects, we had to send a little suspension letters that the project is stalled because of the COVID and shoots are not happening. And obviously, we have to take care of the talent as well. We don't want anybody coming on the set and getting affected or infected with this. So, as a lawyer, when it came to me, I have to build in a lot of force majeure clauses. The actors request us to also add a clause which has insurance built in, but we are negotiating because many insurance companies are not, no, I don't think as of now there's any insurance company which is covering COVID under the production schedule and the production budget. So we tell the actor that, look, as and when the shooting will start, we'll be careful. You have to take care of your health, but we cannot give a blanket indemnity saying that if you get COVID, God forbid, because of the shooting you're having here, we will cover you. Because we never know, after the shoot, they might be traveling somewhere else. So that's the negotiation as of now, which is under process. And let's see now how to go about. But as Zamir rightly said, nobody availed the litigation door, Even, to be honest enough, even the courts were shut down. So many people have come forward, and it's not only that one person or one industry has got affected. Everybody is sailing in the same boat. So that's about it. And I'm sure we're already half year passed by. So maybe next year, whenever the shooting resumes, whenever the problem is that the actors have to be actually very comfortable shooting it. Because once they remove the mask, because now even I'm sure on the set, only a limited people with the costume design, hairstylist, security, their entire entourage will also be cut down. We are waiting for the government to pass proper rules and regulations for shooting for heavy films, and let's see how it goes now.
I was saying, Persis, that somewhere around May, they came out with a long list of guidelines in terms of how the productions will be done. And some of them are so onerous in terms of, having a medical person on the shoot and, having sanitizers on place, maintaining social. And it looked like that it will become impossible to, even if the shoot starts, it will become impossible to really do all of that. What has happened in that regard, and how are things being managed at that?
Again, to have a medical person on the set, having sanitizers, then they want gloves, and they want masks, drinking water facility. Again, everything will increase the production cost. So now when we negotiate a whole film deal on a lock barrel basis, now of course our finance team will have to push up the cost, because now everything will have to be taken into consideration. So again, when the cost goes up, then the profits are to be calculated, net profits, back end, everything will start. It's a circle actually. Everything will start getting affected.
Right.
Yeah, and of course hygiene, and there are many aspects to be maintained. And if there's a shooting location where there are like 200 people on the set, we're still figuring it out how to go about with that. Because if you have a big dance or like an item song in a film, and if there are 200 people dancing behind, how is it going to be possible? So well, I mean, hopefully the vaccine comes out and we all come out of this pandemic very soon. But
you are actually talking about a dance sequence. People are not aware about the numbers which are there. So you're talking about one film.
Exactly.
The numbers is that in India, in a week, there are 43 to 46 films which are released. Out of that, some are Hindi, some are Bhojpuri. So it's So 46 films are released in a week
Correct.
is the
Absolutely.
number. Now imagine the quantum of people involved across India.
Across India, absolutely, and still India is coping up with this kind of situation. And even in India, we were never used to, with this kind of a lifestyle, with this kind of lockdown, and being at home. Even when it came to theatrical release, as Zamir rightly said, all these big chains have shut down. So we'll have to actually sit down and see that when is when are all the theaters not only opening in India but globally, because these big heavy budget movies are not made just for Indian content or Indian population. So everything has to be again, re-strategized. Maybe publicity and marketing cost will go up or not. Everything has to be budgeted again. What is the costing? So everything is in a limbo as of now. Hello?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah.
Please go on.
So that's all from my side. When it comes to
Okay,
film
great. Sure, thanks, Persis.
yeah.
Karan, so in the middle of all of this, we were all apparently talking about movies being run down, productions being stalled, etc., that Zamir and Persis all spoke about. But in the OTT platform space, it really seemed like things are rising and shining, and this is the users were increasing, watch time was increasing, and video views were increasing, which I know calculating your backends and revenues. But in all the positives, were there things that were a challenge from a platform perspective as well?
So, Tanu, sorry, you were not fully audible, but I'm just going to clarify the question you were asking is that while things were generally looking very rosy and sunny, were there challenges as well? So I think, absolutely. I think, look, of course, been a very, very positive time for OTT platforms, because what ended up happening was that there was a marked systemic shift towards OTT from, obviously, compared to cinemas, and obviously there had to be because cinemas were shut and continue to be shut. But from television also, there was a marked shift towards OTT. And if you look at the numbers, it was not just a question of television versus OTT, but even in the OTT space, people who had good specific who had good specific original content, or content that was specifically and exclusively on OTTs, was saw major growth, while broadcaster OTTs actually saw some degrowth. So I think, and the reason for that was that because obviously broadcaster OTTs and TV channels rely on daily soaps, and because productions were shut down, daily soaps had no, on 19th of March is when Maharashtra government announced that shootings would stop overnight, basically. I think 18th or 19th of March, if I remember correctly. And they finally went back on the floor only in mid-July. So, throughout most of March, April, May, June, there was no new content on TV. So there was a marked shift to OTT, and saw a huge sort of increase in viewership and in engagement. And interestingly, that shift has remained after the sort of unlocks have started, so to speak, because people had the opportunity to come and try this out and liked it. The beauty is that they came, they saw, they liked, and they stayed, and they're continuing to now come and watch different kinds of content on these platforms. MX obviously has done very well. We had 8 or 9 shows release, original shows released within this period. We just had one of our biggest shows released yesterday, actually. I encourage you all to watch it. I'm going to use this opportunity for a shameless plug to watch Ashram. But along with all this good news, as you said, there were some challenges. We were lucky that we had a lot of content lying already shot, and we could, through the lockdowns, we could work on post-production to get that content ready for broadcast. But with a lot of people, and us included, multiple shows that would have gone on the floor and started shooting were cancelled. And OTT shows are much closer to films in their shooting structure, right? They are large productions. They are not just limited to few studio floors. They have outdoor scenes. They have sets. They have locations. They have multiple, cast members, extras going in and out. So like films, everything was completely stopped, and only now in the last few weeks has that restarted. So certainly, I would say that over the year, the level of output for OTT will also have been affected. Certainly, I think, and I think that counts for most of the players in the space, that because no one could shoot for 4 months, things will get somewhat delayed probably for the rest of this year. But in general, I mean, all pros and cons weighed together, net, it's been a very positive time for OTTs. And I think, even when this whole debate of movies going to cinemas versus not was happening, you notice that the debate was not movie versus cinema versus TV. It was cinema versus OTT. TV was never mentioned in this debate. So I think that systemic shift has happened, and I think it's great.
Fantastic. But what was happening on the revenue space of it? Like, I know MX depends a lot on ad revenues at the moment, and the subscription platforms were, of course, saying that the subscriptions are going up along with viewers going up. Although I think they were discounting the subscription prices, to incentivize viewers. But for you, from an ad spend perspective, did it affect you at all?
So yes, in the beginning, I would say in the first month and a half, there was a downturn in some parts of our revenue streams. But actually, what happened very quickly, within a few weeks, we realized that on the core video advertising business, things actually went up, because again, the money started moving from television to OTT. And when advertisers realized that, that's when that's when when people start going onto these platforms, the money follows. And I think the one big thing that happened on ad revenues was that, see, typically, for any brand, any agency with a particular brand, you have your media plans relatively set towards the beginning of the year, right? You have your annual deals worked out with different publishers and whatnot. And what this led to, what normally would happen every year, was that, yes, obviously digital was growing and digital video was growing, but you would move 5% more money from one media to the other. But now you had an opportunity to wipe the slate clean, because advertising slumped so much. Everyone realizing, oh wait, now we need to think from a clean slate as to where we need to actually go for our viewers. And very quickly the realization happened that, wait, the viewers are all on digital, right? So OTT benefited massively from that. We benefited massively from that. But I would say in general, digital media has just benefited massively, because we've always known that the user base was here. It's just that the money was taking time to move due to sort of, what I would call the structural microeconomics of how advertising works. But I think that move has happened now. I think you'll see major moves. I think this is just the beginning. Next 6 months is going to be very positive.
Great, that's fantastic. Okay, on that positive note, we'll maybe bring in Parul here to just discuss some of the recent things that have happened. First is, of course, already touched upon, production guidelines and how those have to looked at in future. But Parul, in between this time, and I think taking from Karan, we were also talking about advertising at the moment. There was this new consumer protection, right, which came into force, and all of the provisions were notified. And there was a shift from the earlier Consumer Protection Act, and so much so that digital platforms or services which are being digitally offered today are made part of, they are defined as electronic service providers, and there is reference to advertisements and how misleading misleading information is communicated. What are your thoughts on that in terms of how that's going to affect the internet or digital platforms going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Tanu. Yes, and while, we were grappling with the issues of pandemic, we suddenly realized that the Consumer Protection Act, came in came into force. So, not much time, I would say, unfortunately, the companies, the digital companies have actually got to read the text and then to understand, what are the various provisions and implications of the act. Why is it important to suddenly deep dive into the act is, of course, various definitions and various aspects of the Consumer Protection Act have now been expressly made applicable to digital products and services and the digital companies. Of course, very heavy penalties have also been laid down, including criminal penalties, and therefore, there is a need to immediately sort of, look into the enforcement of the act. So, just to give an overview, the act has been made, like you rightly said, the act has been made applicable to goods as well as services, and that includes digital products and services. Point to be noted that it applies to products and services which a consumer pays for. So it can be interpreted that the services which are free of charge are, of course, right now not covered expressly under the act. From an advertising business perspective for digital companies, where they are publishing advertisements, third-party advertisements, the definition and the compliances around electronic service provider has come into play. For subscription-based services, compliances pertaining to product seller would then apply, and so forth. The other concept that has come in is the concept of unfair trade practices. Here, what they've done is, they've also got into the data protection principle. So Act considers it as an unfair trade practice if any personal information given by any consumer in confidence and gathered in the course of transaction, if it gets disclosed to another person without the consent. Further, the concept of unfair contracts has now been expressly specified. So imposing on a consumer any unfair penalty, any unreasonable charge, unilateral termination or assignment of contracts have now, considered as unfair contracts. So I think the key point here for the digital companies would be that the online terms and conditions, which were, very conveniently ignored, and therefore all the fine prints were then put into these, without even getting any active consent. So that becomes a problem here. So the TNCs now, online TNCs and privacy policies will need to be, looked into, that these are not one-sided. They don't appear to be one-sided or, too detrimental to the consumers. Active, automatic renewal of contracts need to be looked into, whether they will be valid now. Active consents will need to be, obtained. Pre-tick checkboxes, which was earlier a norm, would not work now under the Consumer Protection Act. The other key development that happened here is that they have stringent penalties and compliances have been put in place for false and misleading advertisements. And the penalties go, the obligations are on the advertiser, on the endorser, as well as on the publisher. Now, insofar as publishing platforms are concerned, the question is whether the safe harbor protections under the IT Act, would come into play. Now, so long as the publisher is merely a publisher of the third-party advertisement and has no control on the content of the advertisement, well, you can still build a case around seeking these intermediary or safe harbor provisions, provided sufficient preventive measures have been put in place. So those being sufficient checks and balances to be undertaken, that these, third-party ads, some sort of due diligence has been done on the ads. Sufficient reps and warranties to be taken from the advertiser contracts, immediately take down of the content as and when the authority approaches you. Now, the challenges with digital advertising in the age of programmatic media buying and ad exchanges, where there are multiple intermediary platforms and agencies involved here, seeking reps and warranties from an advertiser becomes a problem. That is because the publisher now in these kind of programmatic deals, the publisher does not have a privity of contract with the advertiser directly. And these agencies, multiple agencies come into play. So seeking reps and warranties and from these intermediary platforms becomes a very, very strong negotiating point. And what we've seen is that these intermediaries also do not want to take responsibility because they play on the same fact that they are not aware of who the advertisers are. So there's a long chain here, and therefore the question comes as to how, when suddenly the order comes from the authority of takedown of the advertisement, or doing a due diligence, or ensuring, or even seeking any reps and warranties, or for example any advertiser details, unfortunately the publisher in these kind of deals would not have this data. So well, I mean, these are the issues that we are right now sort of grappling with. The other challenge that has come is that we create a lot of advertisements for for third parties, for example, taking influencers and endorsers into having contracts with them. Now the problem is that the act has also put stringent compliances and obligations on these influencers and endorsers. So any entity, you cannot endorse a third party ad unless you have done your due diligence, and therefore that and also to ensure that there is no misleading information being communicated to the consumer. So I think these are the challenges that have now come into play, and therefore I think it requires a lot of deep dive and to see practically how will it really work. For even the e-commerce rules, they're right now very vague, and what has to be seen is how will they really apply to digital products and services.
Right. Thanks, Parul. That's very insightful. Karan, Parul just mentioned influencers, and I'll take you on to this, which is my personal favorite in terms of the current space, which I guess happened after those multiple applications were banned by the government, and of course TikTok was one of them, and which created a huge vacuum. And until then, I think TikTok was sort of in the news for oftentimes in the news for all the wrong reasons. There were PILs and there were orders being filed against TikTok. And I think in its tenure, while it was a successful business, clearly, but it saw it all in India in its tenure. And now with the ban, with the government ban, it seems like suddenly it is a new business segment altogether. The whole short video application format, which is seeing so much competition, firstly, newfound competition in the media space, plus a lot of interest from the investors also, which we've seen as part of our practice. And I think taking from what Parul was saying, it has really created this new segment of celebrities and influencers and endorsers, with lakhs and lakhs people following, really the Gen X young people. So I'd love to know what's been your experience in this space. Of course, MX also has MX Takatak now, which is one of the leading ones on that segment. But what are the opportunities from there, and what are the challenges of that segment? I think a lot of our attendees today are also people in the media segment and business owners. I'm sure they'll have great takeaways from you.
So thanks, Tanu. I think so. You're right. It opened up a very interesting new segment to actually go and operate in. And of course, it was an unnatural opening in the sense that it came through this scenario where there was a ban, and it opened up the space for multiple guys to come in. We actually took a call fairly quickly. 1st of July evening, we had a sort of meeting of some of our key folks, and realized that look, there's opportunity here. And 8th of July, the product was in the market. So in less than a week, it was conceptualized, developed, released, and marketing had started. And since then, it's grown phenomenally. Today, we see huge engagement on that platform itself. As you said, a few that came out around that time. And I think what's happened in the next and what's happened in the month and a half since then is that it's begun to shake out as you would imagine it would. That you've got a few folks that have started to take off, and then you've got a few folks that came out and have settled down to the bottom of that pack. But it's a very interesting space. It's interesting because there are different need states in a user's day, right? There are times when you want to lean back, put something on and spend half an hour, 40 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours watching something, right? Could be a show, could be a movie, right? Long form content. It's probably when you're, when you're done with your day with work, or, you want to kick back, or you have time on the weekend, or, things like that. Obviously with work from home, obviously that had changed to, as we keep joking in India, WFH means watch from home. But I think what short video also allows you to do is that when you have 5 minutes, or when you have 10 minutes of time, whether you're on your way somewhere, or you're waiting for something to start, or you're multiple times in a day when you have 5 or 10 minutes. It is very interesting because we are now catering to, and as you know, we also on MX have games and music. So we actually see a user's journey throughout the day. So when you're wanting to spend time engaged with content, you're spending time watching long form content, we have you. Music is a lean back experience. When you put music on, you put it on and you leave it. You don't necessarily then interact with your music app actively after that. It just stays on in the background. But with short video, it's that times in the day that allow you to go and immerse yourself, and it's very immersive. People flip through, like, it's amazing that people watch hundreds of videos a day on this platform. So when you flip through this, when you flip through these videos, the engagement is very high. So what this does is it's a very unique proposition for an advertiser, right? You're a very engaged audience coming, sitting through. And philosophically, it's quite different from any other kind of media, because it's a very different user set. It's a very different creator set. It's the top influencers on these short video platforms are all below the age of 25. I mean mostly, some below the age of 18, very frankly, but all below the age of 25. And the kind of content that firstly you would never have imagined, and suddenly you're hooked to. Like I took some time getting onto short video, but now when I went on it, it's endlessly engaging. And so but it also, it's a tough proposition to get right, because your technical chops have to be very, very, very solid to be able to provide that sort of machine learning approach. Because when you're flipping through like hundreds of videos in a day, you can't curate it. The machine, the platform has to understand your taste and be able to serve up something to you. It's a very engaging platform. So I think good open field now, lots of exciting opportunity in that one. And so from our perspective, it's great, because we do it across long form video, short form video, music, and gaming. So we try to capture the user's attention at all parts of the day. But very interesting next 6 months ahead, I would say.
But like you said, on this segment, there are many aspects to running and making this platform work. Also, the short video bit, there is music there are influencer engagements there, and there's also you have to invest in technology, I suppose, to strengthen the platform. So, in terms of investments versus revenues versus success versus popularity, where do you see this segment going? And given that today there are multiple players in the market who are really competing to find their space and succeed in the space.
So I think first, like I said, just to reiterate the point I made right at the beginning, the wheat from the chaff separation has started. You had I would say, if you had asked this question in the second week of July, the question would have been, yeah, there's 6 guys competing. Now it's very clear. There's, it's 1 or 2 up here. We are one of them. At least we feel so. And then there's the rest that have sort of come back, because it's not an easy proposition, right? You require capital, of course, because you need to invest in talent, you need to invest in content, you need to invest in technology. The second part is, even if you're willing to invest in the technology, it's not easy to do. This is all this is tech that is over the years been perfected by some of the larger platforms in the world, and you need to be able to we talk about the bubble, right? The sort of echo chamber, so to speak. But in certainly in social apps, that echo chamber is also somewhat important, because if you go onto the app and you see 5 videos you like, and then the next 10 videos you see are not of interest to you, you leave. The only way you stay is that you got to make sure all of the stuff that you see is relevant to you, and that's not an easy task. You've got probably hundreds of different vectors that go into why someone likes something, and you got to process like millions, hundreds of millions, billions, trillions of data points, frankly, at scale, to be able to take all that data and be able to give your user an experience that he or she likes. So I think it's not while it's a very promising and lucrative opportunity, and like I said, because very highly engaged, there's a large revenue opportunity here. It's an ideal platform for brands to engage with customers. But it'll take time and capital to get there.
Right. Payal, going back to you, because Karan brought up technology, and how technology is going to be key in driving, this segment, and I'm sure other segments as well. And you brought up earlier that the Consumer Protection Act also now emphasizes on data security, etc. How in the post, given going forward, how much do you think, what's the importance of our data security, data privacy for platforms to strengthen, that aspect of their entire platform from a compliance perspective? What are your thoughts on going forward? What should people, consider investing in terms of compliance and technology?
Yeah, thanks, Tanu. Yeah, so as Karan also rightly pointed out, M&E sector, is one of the highest collectors of, collectors and processors of individual data. Media companies and OTT platforms, of course, collect a lot of personal data at the time of registration for service, or even when the users are browsing or using the apps and content. Data is collected to provide, personalized recommendations for content as well as for targeted advertisements. Hence, there's an increased, amount of personal data that gets captured. Now, with the onset of pandemic, the media sector has witnessed, of course, a surge in the access and usage of online content by the customers, and hence increase in that data. Also, the employees now working from home and accessing confidential information of the company, there is increased requirement of ensuring data protection and data security measures. Just talking about, the legal framework which has been there. Well, the Information Technology Act always, had the basic tenets of data protection. However, the implementation of the same lacked the rigor. Then came the GDPR. Why did the digital companies take note of GDPR? Was because the regulation laid down very strict, stringent data protection and consent requirements. Even online identifiers, IP addresses, cookie data came within the framework of personal data. The penalties prescribed, of course, were very onerous. The extraterritorial applicability. The digital businesses have users from various parts of the world, and hence the applicability and compliance becomes important. The draft PDPB, which is now under discussions, is broadly on the same principles of GDPR, consent being, the underlying fiber of it. However, it is not automatically mapped to the provisions of GDPR. And therefore, the compliance, once the PDPB comes into force, and the compliance is going to see its own set of complexities. For example, data storage and data localization, that sensitive data needs to be stored in India. Data accountability, data fiduciaries need to be accountable and should ensure accuracy of data. Data categorization, of course, data security measures laid down. Then the compliance audits which need to be conducted by data fiduciaries. So the question here is that, are the PDPB and Consumer Protection Act compliances adequate? With the increased need of data protection and data security, countries across the world, as we know, are coming up now with their own data protection laws. India itself has seen, as we see from this recent example of Consumer Protection Act, be it the insurance sector, which has its own law, the healthcare sector is coming up with its own law. The challenges for the digital companies would be to marry all of these compliances together. to manage different compliance requirements by different countries is again another, I would say a nightmare as of now, as we see it. Because imagine either you have different, so as of now, well, it was still India versus EU, and we were still looking at where the rest of the world is looking at. We still thought, okay, maybe have a separate, EU sort of a page, and for India, we will do an India sort of a page. But now, if with the CCPA coming into play, with multiple data protection laws coming into play, privacy by design, which is basically having a common privacy tenet, would actually work. But how will it work? It's easier said than done. Now, with every additional checkbox or consent box that you're adding, of course, and Karan could add to that it impacts the user experience, and there is of course a drop in the traffic. So from a business perspective, it of course becomes a nightmare to then marry all of these compliances together. So I think what needs to be then seen is how would you, especially for digital companies where there's global outreach, how would you actually look into these compliances at a global level?
I think, Karan, effectively what Parul is saying is that, other than all of the things that you mentioned, things that need capital, there's compliance and there's data protection as well that needs attention.
It's certainly no shortage of compliance in India across any sector. And I think that in some senses, digital had been insulated from it for many years. But I think that party is over, to be very blunt. I think there's a lot of, I think some of it is needed. I think that there has been a bit of Wild West kind of scenario, and I think there is some regulation definitely needed. But I think that obviously, we as a country tend to talk about light touch regulation, but we have no clue what light touch really means. So I think there is definitely going to be compliance burden to deal with. I think some global examples of, for example, GDPR, of course, is a fairly onerous system. But I think India is also talking about things like the NPD bill, which was again quite what's the right word? Quite innovative, I would say, in its approach on what they want to do there. Plus other, there are a lot of other guys, I think, a lot of other entities within the government that are now trying to understand what different parts of the digital world do. And I think with that, you're going to see, unfortunately, some increase in regulation. But it's part of the cost of doing business, I suppose. And we have to deal with it.
Great. Okay, Zamir, I'll bring you in now here on, of course, we've spoken about platforms and how Karan, of course, seems very positive about platforms and how they're going to be the way. Now, in terms of future, that is perhaps going to be one of the larger mediums that will be popular. What do filmmakers and production houses going forward look at in terms of when they're doing their distribution deals going forward? Things that they should consider, maybe your thoughts on that.
I think Karan should be very happy because he's got a blessing of no censorship at present.
Like he said,
out of all the bad news, there is a good news also.
I was hoping that no one would bring that word into the discussion.
Sorry, film industry. I felt there was a great development which happened in terms of the producers being very determined, So this is overall context being on the neutrality side. We initially thought that the producers of the film would go to OTT platforms. The great development which happened in terms of producers being very determined that films like Suryavanshi, Radhe, 83, which is based on the World Cup, that are made for big theater viewing will stand as long as possible. But expectations were that small films like or other films like Lakshmi Bomb of Akshay Kumar, which he expressed, would go to OTT, that the industry had a sense of it. Some theater chains reacted on the same also. some production houses and other companies also decided to venture more in the OTT business as they had content, and content is always the king. Karan brought out a very important factor uh, in MX Player is about curation, and that's what the complement is about. Uh, so as I said that, we have approximate 43 to 46 movies which were released in India in Hindi, Marathi, Bhojpuri, Telugu, Kannada. Some films that may not get a slot or will go to OTT, but major movies will wait for theatrical release, as even the film stars say that our movies are made for the big screen. And in spite of television and now OTT or future new mediums, the consumption has not gone down for an avid theater goer or theatrical experience. The only balance we will be able to figure out once the theaters start, the difference between the numbers. There are good numbers which are there on OTT. Once the industry start, you'll be able to figure out on the context of it. From a legal perspective, yes, we saw theater chains having issues on rentals, cost, legal notices, etc. We also saw an innovation which happened. Like for example, Vox Cinema, which is like a PVR cinema in Dubai. They started drive-in cinemas. We were one of the technology partners with them. They came out with a technology where you can sit inside your car, and now the technology connects you to the car speaker itself. So you can have air condition on in your car. You can have the car speakers which are giving the volume instead of the outside speakers. Best sanitized environment, food services, etc. was given. So some other technology are soon going to be make cinema a different experience. See, people go to cinema for a experiential part. There is a cinematic experience which is associated with that, and socializing and all that. So once you have the best sanitization and social distancing in place, as is required, cinemas, I can tell you today, I have access to the processes and the sanitization they have come up with. The cinema industry has come out with such a good sanitization and social distancing norm that once they start, so we were comparing once to the airline industry because airlines have started to an extent, they have come out with a great plan. Akshay Kumar said that, India needs about 35,000 cinemas. We have just 4,000 plus. So he's speaking about 7 times more. And this means that people love cinemas. Producers, distributors, and exhibitors were also, with all precautions, are waiting for cinemas to open, as there are 146 big movies which are ready to go on the shelf. We have to now observe in next 3 months what happens. No cinema wants to even compromise, forget the sanitization part, they don't want to even compromise on the health of any patron because cinema is an experience. And I think what they have done for the processes, protocols and all is the best investment to mitigate the risk to audience. In terms of the new opportunity on OTT, I'm a fan of a free market. Having worked for Reliance, Balaji, Ekta Kapoor as head legal, I think web series got a good platform on OTT. Conversion of alt Balaji into an OTT platform. This was an idea of Ekta Kapoor in 2012, 2014 when I was in the organization, because alt Balaji otherwise was a different business. I think she thought about this as a best innovative approach in 2012, 2014, and look where it is today. I have heard that some businesses are also planning on OTT with regional content, which has big market not only in India but also abroad, and probably big platforms may be thinking in that direction. The only thing which I see the benefit to the industry is to see the amount of work which the actors are getting who do not get opportunity to showcase their talent. I think this is one of the neutral views I would express. Banning Chinese companies like TikTok, which had around 28 crore subscriber, has also opened a best opportunity. While there are Indian apps like Chirangi and all that apps which are existing, I think it's a great opportunity for the Indian companies also to gear up. Instagram is coming with its own app of Reels, as also Indian companies are launching. It is also a great opportunity for small films. See, today the math is that you get a film success and then you get satellite and OTT.
Yeah.
If your film has got a good access of OTT, tomorrow it can, the theaters would like to show those films and that's how it can work on both sides also, which is one of the benefits in the industry. uh, Contracts have started speaking for safety in view of the pandemic. Sanitization processes are in place. uh, I feel it's a great time. The number of platforms what you add to show the content is always beneficial to the public. It's a free market. uh, Cinema will stay, television will stay, OTT will stay. I think they are a good combination in altogether for the public at large. That's my view.
Great, Zamir. In fact, on that note, we have a question from one of the attendees today. And I think Karan was also mentioning this earlier that for big commercial movies, which are typically planned for a theatrical release, the discussion has been around release on OTT and not on television. So one of our attendees is asking if there's in future, if there's a possibility that the release happens on satellite instead of any other medium.
See, the major collection of these movies is from the theatrical release, number one. Number two, the cinema experience is completely different than television and OTT. You go to cinemas, the setup is completely different. It's a social gathering. You go with your friends, families, etc. It's a complete different environment. Number three, these movies like Suryavanshi and all, they are made for the big screen, so where there are people, there is shouting, there is whistling, So not only the public is expressing this, even when you talk to the big actors, they would say, I have made my film for the big theater, that's the spirit. So it's that cinematic experience and the entertainment which you bring, which I feel that big movies would stay back for the theaters. Uh, Technologies have evolved in last 100 years. UFO was one of the pioneer in the digital content technology, because you had those 100 years old Kodak reels which were there, which was replaced by a digital projector, and UFO was pioneer in that. It not only brought a good content, it also brought a quality of the content. The piracy stopped. Even the ex-prime minister of the company has given certificate to the company. So technologies will keep coming, content will be made. Wherever you have more access to the content, I would appreciate all the avenues which are available, but cinema will stay together with complementing technologies, television, OTT, and any future technology which would come up. And big movies, yes, are meant for cinema release. I've accepted that fact.
Even the actors won't be comfortable releasing that on the OTT.
Yeah, in fact,
when they shoot, even with the direct act, they make it with a thought process that it will definitely go theatrical. After that, after 60 days of time slot, it does open on OTT, but definitely it will. The theaters will remain.
Yeah, I think one of my thoughts here has also been that in all of this time, all the movies that eventually got released in OTT and not on theaters, maybe once things are back to normal, there may be a re-release on the theaters, because you can't take away the theater experience.
I always feel technologies are complementing. Like when television came up, the satellite release came up. The release happens in theater, and then after 8 weeks, it happened in satellite, and then OTT. I think they will be complementing each other. The only factor which I see is that it will be complementing on both sides. So, like you said, re-release and all that. Yeah. I think it's there. Cinema will stay, but I feel that the technologies will complement each other's in the market.
Absolutely. Okay, since we're running out of time, Persis, would you, would you share your thoughts, some last thoughts on going forward, your typical contracts in the media industry that we look at, production deals, talent engagements, distributions, insurances, anything from a new perspective that we should look at in future when we are negotiating?
Yeah, so when we do talent agreements and director, and on one project, we have almost 150 talent attached to it. So I actually have to go through the journey of closing 150, 200 contracts. So every contract now, the clause which I will look into it is firstly, of course, the force majeure. Secondly, the production schedule, because as of now, during this pandemic, we have locked so many artists, but there is no way forward, or as of now, there is no clarity Because see, even the shoot sometimes doesn't happen in the same state where the actor is staying. The actor has to travel for the stay, then his entourage. So we'll now have to, build up clauses that the production schedule will be mutually agreed. Again, that will depend on the laws which will be laid down by the respective state where the shoot has to be done. Actor has to comply to that. So those clauses will be built in. Indemnity will be built in. And let's see what insurance companies come up with. And lastly, there is a new thing which has come up in the contract is that the actor usually says that I am giving my services, but the content has to be released theatrically. And if you release on OTT or any other platform, then you have to have first my approval on the same. Which now, as a lawyer, we have to do a lot of back and forth that it is the management and the investor who will decide, and it is not about the talent who will decide. But of course,
Yeah.
if we have huge A-listers, so we always tell the managers and the lawyers that look, even if we go to the other platforms, we will definitely intimate you, but don't keep it on an approval basis. See, also we have to understand they come from a thought process that there is a back end attached to it. As Zamir rightly said, the major chunk of the money comes from the theatrical window. So of course that backend is going to get affected. That's why they negotiate with us a lot. But now we have to, depending on the actor, the talent, the budget, we try to balance out the draft, that whether it will be intimation or whether it will be approval. So those are the new clauses which now gets built in the agreement. And in case if there is a lockdown and there is a delay in the shooting schedule, they should not approach the court. There should not be injunctive relief. What will be the payment tranches? Then they have to resume back to the shoot. And once they resume back, have they tied up with another third-party projects? Because they cannot sit at home.
Yeah.
I mean, even if they are sitting at home, they're doing branding, for the different whatever companies they are attached with. So all these
Right.
things, now actually the talent agreements, all of them will have to be, relooked at and revised in after this pandemic gets over.
Great, thanks, Persis.
Yeah.
Karan, last thoughts. In future, do you suggest there are, typical or some common strategies that media owners or businesses can look forward for success in future? And generally in terms of where to invest, how to strategize, how to, focus on your content, what sort of deals to do. Any last thoughts on that?
I think the one thing I'd just leave with is that there's likely to be a very we are heading towards a sort of convergence of all these different kinds of media, right? Long form, short form, theatrical, television, all of these things, while there was a lot of debate right now in the last few minutes on theatrical versus OTT/TV. I actually think that so I agree that theatrical will always remain, but I think one thing that has really come out of this entire debate is that India never had other mediums of release. You mentioned, I think Zamir was mentioning that there are 46 films a week that release in India, right? We are highly underscreened as a country. Those movies can't make money. The total number of movies released in India maybe whatever, some 2,000, but the reality is that 50 to 100 of those movies actually make any money in theatrical. The bulk of the and the rest of the movies actually lose money. And when you look at the West, you've always had multiple distribution mediums, because you've always had made for TV movies, direct to video movies, all of that, which none of that has existed in India because our distribution system was not capable of handling it. We only had either broadcast TV, which was everybody got everything. Only recently in the last 2-3 years, CAS and DAS and all this stuff have started to emerge, or you are theatrical. Today you have, so I think as you go forward, the biggest difference that has happened is that there are now multiple distribution media. You can now create content for different audiences, different distribution systems parallelly. You don't necessarily always have to make a movie and go to the theater. You can make a lot of good movies and go direct to OTT, direct to TV.
Great. On that positive note, we come to the end of our session today. We have a few questions in the chat box from our attendees, but I think we'll take them offline with each of you. We've unfortunately run out of time for this session. Thank you very much to all of our panelists, Parul, Zamir, Karan, Persis. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today.
Thanks for
Thank
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you to the audience. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.